Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Here you at Live Inside the Beltway. Foreign Affairs is the preeminent magazine of the Blob. The Blob is the national security foreign affairs establishment, the Council on Foreign Relations, the 1,000 think tanks, everybody who's ever been anyone in national security. And it still is the journal of record. Foreign Affairs is the journal of record for where American foreign policy is going, the consensus position. So I was thrilled when the new issue came out last week, and it headlines an article co-authored by Ambassador Robert O'Brien and historian Arthur Herman on the need for Congress to help the president counter China. And I tracked down Ambassador O'Brien, the last national security advisor and the most successful national security advisor under President Trump. And he's in Tokyo this morning. Good morning, Robert. It is 9 p.m. there. Thank you for staying up late with me.
Good morning. Greetings from Tokyo.
So the Foreign Affairs magazine is the beating heart of the establishment. I am amazed that they let you and Arthur write for it.
Well, what we're seeing, and we're seeing this in Tokyo at the Munich Security Conference, is that there's a new consensus developing. And our allies know, the establishment knows, that we're in a race for our life against China. With the advent of AI, quantum computing, the tech race that we're in, our way of life is on the line right now. And we either win and maintain a free country, a free world, or we lose, and it's going to be a dystopian future. And what's amazing to me is not just that the establishment in Washington printed our article, it's the fact that here the Japanese, the Germans, the French, the English, the Australians for sure, are coming to the same consensus.
So when Richard Nixon published his article on China in 1967, it was the first omen that a change was coming. I think when you and Secretary Pompeo and Christopher Wray and Bill Barr and Vice President Pence did your cycle of speeches in the last year of the Trump presidency on China, that was a sign that the weather had changed. However, this morning in the Post, David Ignatius has a column on your successor as National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, being in Vienna for 2 days and being very pleased with the direction of Chinese-American relations. That's a head fake, Robert. I mean, that's just a giant head fake. Are we going to go backwards now that we move forwards?
Look, I hope not. And Jake's been one of the more hawkish folks in the Biden administration on China. We'll see. I think what's happening to China understands is that the free world is starting to band together against them, and they're getting nervous when you have Israel, Japan, Taiwan, Korea, the U.S., UK, Netherlands getting together to deny China the tools it needs for the semiconductor industry, building legacy plants for semiconductors, not just the advanced plants. So we're bringing the supply chain back to the free world. They're seeing that big tech, the backlash against big tech is, I think, hit a crest, and it's falling away. So that I think they were hoping that they'd use the U.S. Congress to get rid of Google and Apple and other big tech companies.
The Foreign Affairs article lists a bunch of things you want Congress to do. And I don't want to run out of time without giving a summary because it's behind a paywall. And some people subscribe to Foreign Affairs because it is the journal of record for the national security blob establishment. Call it what you will. It matters. What are the key things that you and Arthur Herman want the Congress to do?
Well, we got to ban TikTok immediately. I was on a panel this morning here in Tokyo with a senator from Australia, James Patterson, young guy. He's a social media guru. He put out a report through his committee on TikTok, and it's horrifying. So we got to ban TikTok. We've got to stop the Chinese from buying agricultural land around our military bases. We've got to shut down the Confucius Institutes at all our colleges and universities where they're spying on Chinese expats and stealing research from our universities. There shouldn't be one Confucius Institute or some fake new name Confucius Institute at any college in America. And if the college wants a Confucius Institute, they want Chinese money, we got to cut them off from the money. So those are just a couple examples here of things that are totally within our control that we can do right now to protect against the communist Chinese.
Now, you have followed the Belt and Road Initiative very closely, as is obvious from the Foreign Affairs article. Does the Congress need to support the executive in countering that kind of, whether it's a port in Namibia, a port in Cambodia, a base in Djibouti? The CCP is everywhere with CCP money. Does the United States have to follow them and outbid them everywhere?
We don't have to outbid them, but what we can do is offer a better alternative, a less corrupt version of the foreign aid that they're getting from China, a version where the half the foreign aid doesn't go to dictators' bank accounts in Switzerland, and the other half goes to Chinese companies that bring Chinese workers in. So that's why every time I take a foreign trip to one of these developing countries, I always took Kim Reed from OPIC or Adam Bowler from DFC with me to show that the U.S. could finance projects, but we could do it in a transparent way and a way that benefited the people of that country, whether it's Kenya or Namibia or Brazil, and that they could have trusted 5G, they could have trusted factories, trusted port systems, and not be hostage to the Chinese.
Now, Robert, you are loved in Japan because you forged a pretty good relationship with their old national security advisor, with the deceased prime minister, with their ruling party. Now, this security conference is a new development. It's bigger than Montreal, it's bigger than Reagan, it's bigger than Munich. What are they talking about in the hallways of Japan when they talk about China?
Look, people are worried. The biggest thing they're worried about is scale. The Chinese are so big and they're so committed to winning in AI and quantum and robotics that if they get ahead of us, and especially with things like quantum and AI, we could have a very dystopian future. They'll control the world, and a Chinese world is not a pleasant world. It's a world where Uyghurs go to concentration camps, where Democrats in Hong Kong are put out of business and put in jail. It's a world where India and Taiwan and ASEAN countries in the South China Sea are threatened with military action if they don't kowtow and toe the Chinese line. Very different world than the world we're living in today, and everyone knows it. The French know it, the Germans know it. Of course, all the ASEAN nations know it. They're worried.
Well, it used to be that Japan's ruling party didn't really want a confrontation with China, and they had strained relations with South Korea. Is the alliance actually taking shape at this conference?
Well, we're seeing the South Koreans and the South Korean president and the Japanese prime minister get together 2 weeks ago and talk about how they can work together. There's a lot of interest in the Quad, the diplomatic arrangement between Australia, India, the U.S., and Japan, and other countries went in. I mean, I kind of call it the cool kids at the lunch table syndrome. That now the ROK and Taiwan and other countries want to get in on the Quad. The French have sent a lot of resources out to the South Pacific, to their islands. So I think that, there's an understanding that China is going to be very aggressive, and the best way to avoid a war with China, which everyone's worried about, is through deterrence. It's through peace through strength. It's not through appeasement. I think the old days of appeasing China, people realize that just created a more aggressive and a more assertive China. It's now time for the free world to deter China.
Now, has Japan banned TikTok? I'm not sure they have the big tech replacement that our big tech can provide for social media, but do they have a replacement for TikTok?
I don't know if Japan has a great replacement, but I'll tell you one thing they have is they've banned Huawei, and they've been just terrific on 5G. So you don't have Huawei in Japan. You've got Japanese 5G and eventually Japanese 6G, and some of those companies are going to do business in the U.S. So TikTok is a problem everywhere. The Indians have banned it, but it's a whole combination of TikTok and Huawei and WeChat and Chinese intellectual property theft of quantum computing advances being made in Japan and the U.S. It's a whole package that we've got to. The Chinese are relentless, and we've got to confront them on all fronts.
It would not be a Robert O'Brien interview if I didn't ask you about the Japanese Navy. China has built the biggest Navy in the least amount of time in the history of humankind. What is Japan doing on the water and under the water to counter that fleet?
Well, I'm going to talk about this in a speech tomorrow in Tokyo. One of the things is the Japanese have probably the best diesel electric sub in the world. They run forever. They're kind of like the Honda that I drove in college, and all you have to do is change the oil. It lasted for years. But the Japanese trade in their submarines for new ones every couple of years. They need to extend the life of their submarines and go from a fleet of 22 submarines to 28, 29 submarines. That'll be a real deterrent, and if a war broke out, it would be a huge advantage for the West in a conflict with China. So, look, Japan is doing some great things. They've increased defense spending to the magic 2% of the GDP number. They've converted their helicopter aircraft carriers to real aircraft carriers, so the F-35 can fly off them, the F-35B. So Japan's doing a lot, but going back to your point, Hugh, with everything Japan has done in the last 5 years, China has built more ships than the entire Japanese Navy since 2016.
It's amazing. Ambassador Robert O'Brien, thank you for joining me. Follow him on Twitter at Robert C. O'Brien. Go and read his Foreign Affairs magazine piece, co-authored with Arthur Herman, called The President Can't Counter China on His Own. Every member of the national security community needs to read and remember this. Have a great time and go to bed, Ambassador. Thank you for staying up late in Tokyo. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.